interpret the poem was really, at first it sounded really intense and sad, and ultimately my first response was just that it's a really powerful poem because it evokes a lot in such a short sort of format. But for me, when I think about the privileges I have in mobility, the privileges I have on a day-to-day level, compared to like other folks that I know in the community and so forth, like it makes me like grateful, but at the same time it makes me question how I can use those privileges sort of as a weapon or a tool to address oppression and repression. And that's to me how I interpret the shadows in the poem, are really representational of oppression and like that darkness that sort of you can succumb to. And there's so much to that, because there's a lot of Native youth, especially in our communities, that they are very disempowered because they're very well acquainted with those dark shadows of alcoholism, the dark shadows of suicide, depression, and many things that when we look at the root of it, it's because we're disconnected, dislodged through colonialism from our cultural roots that empower us, that you know, inspire us and give us that positive self-worth that you know, can help us overcome any shadows, any challenges that we face.
Well, how I interpret the poem is that you may be having a life that you're kind of happy with and that you feel part of, and then sometimes you can have such huge crises that basically destroy the life that you knew it, and it can seem like there's nothing more that you can do, right? Like you can't run anymore, or you can't do what you thought you could do before, and you can't imagine life not being able to do that. But things can happen such that you end up with a different life. It's not the life you had before, but it can be a life as great or even better than the previous life if you start to look for a different way of how you can live in the world.
Well, I interpret the poem in three parts. First, it talked about a guy running, and I just saw it as this person running to the east, you know, Navajo traditional style, running to the east, waking up really early in the morning and exercising that way. And the second part talked about, I guess, a shadow coming out and grabbing the person who was running. And then that just immediately popped into that image. I kind of thought about, you know, a boogeyman, just something silly like that. And then the last part, it ended with enduring hardships. And I just connected that with Kinlani students here in Flagstaff, those Flagstaff high school students who stay at Kinlani dorm. I was just imagining them enduring the hardships that they have to go through. I think I kind of see that as them graduating high school and then going on to college and earning a degree and being successful in life.
The first time I read the poem, I took it very, like, I saw it at the beginning as almost playful, where you were saying that you could, you're born into a world where you could run, so I imagined someone running, of course, and then like a shadow, like a Grim Reaper almost, coming out and stopping them or tripping them and causing them misfortune. And later in the poem it says that although there are challenges, you still soar to new heights, overcoming them and things. So I took it as someone having great misfortune bestowed upon them and then overcoming their problems while learning more about themselves.
The shadows that I've overcome are, I guess that's a powerful question too, and a very personal question. For me, the shadows that I've overcome are ones that I really just see in my community. I think probably the ones that I named before, suicide and depression and alcoholism, not necessarily with myself, but with my friends and family. I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, and while it's not a shadow that you understand for those who have passed necessarily, it still casts a shadow on and for those who are living. So for me, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to help or assist people through depression and challenging times, so they don't think of suicide as an option, or it doesn't seem to be, an option at all. Some other shadows that I've personally overcome are just, a lot of people know me as like a performer, entertainer, musician, but I used to be really shy. I used to be really not confident with my voice, and so it took a lot of work for me to feel confident and assert myself and understand that my voice was powerful and that what I was, saying, or my thoughts and feelings had a lot of value to them, so that way I could communicate them and not feel insecure. So insecurity would have been a shadow. Lack of good confidence would have been a shadow as well. But there's a lot of shadows. I think there are also other shadows that I continue to face and I don't feel like I've gotten out of, but it's like the larger shadow that's cast from the history of colonialism, and with that capitalism and how it impacts our communities in many different ways through, for example, the struggle to protect the holy San Francisco peaks, where we're faced with a corporation or a business and a public land management agency, the Forest Service, who see greed or profit more important than culture and environment and public health. So that's a really intense shadow that I feel like I've constantly been trying to, find ways within myself through culture, through spirituality, and through different skills of activism and different trainings that I go through to be successful, to stop them from destroying that which is sacred.
The boogeyman in my life, probably I'm trying to think of some that I don't think. Well, there are some. I think it probably the same as the Kinlani students. Really missing home. Really, really wanting to strive for what you're doing, but then not having that feeling of not being able to achieve it. They have all these feelings of self-doubt. They're insecure with a lot of things. They're worried about what other people say about them. I think those are pretty much the biggest things in my life that are the shadows.
I guess some of my shadows are that I'm shy, and I don't like to speak in front of people or play music in front of people, show people things that I've done, because I'm afraid of rejection.
I would say now, there's so many, it's hard to name, but I think the shadows that have been bothering me the most is how in our communities, how often the most painful experiences you have aren't actually necessarily from the larger society that you expect to get it from, but people in your own communities that don't support the work you're trying to do, or maybe feel threatened because of the issues of internalized oppression. And so sometimes you feel like you're battling the people you should be closest to because of those kind of jealousies and all the things that are the legacies of oppression and colonialism. And it can just wear you down when you're not just fighting the current system, but you're trying to fight people in your own community.
So I have overcome those shadows through just learning and experience and having, in some ways I'm blessed to have a supportive family that's very much rooted in cultural values. And for me that was, I think, one of the most important things. And not just with my own family, but also friends and people in the community. When it comes down to it, I think the strongest way I've been able to overcome the shadows, though, are through spirituality, through traditional cultural practices. Because when I look to my cultural practices and through prayer, I can understand like a lot of how these issues, these shadows are impacting me, and be able to then address them through prayer and through the ceremony as well. I think part of it too is trying to have a sense of humor. I think that's one of the most powerful things, because sometimes I do feel jaded. I feel very bitter, especially because one shadow recently that I had to address was, the issue of sexual assault in this community, where a volunteer at a place that I work or volunteer at as well was sexually assaulted by another member in the community, and everybody else, or a lot of people in this community, sort of chose sides of the perpetrator, the person who committed the act of sexual assault against the other person, and that was really trying, and it's still something that I'm trying to challenge those shadows. And to me, like, challenging those shadows really means shedding light on the situation, which means exposing the truth and allowing people to understand really what's happening, and then taking action, actually taking, not just sort of sidestepping or being a bystander to the issue, but taking direct action to ensure that there's no further harm or injustice committed against other people in the community. You know, so for me, it's a really hard issue because it's a really personal issue, and it involves a lot of things that you have to be sensitive. You have to exercise great care, because anytime you get involved in something like that, your actions can really impact negatively, of course, and positively, which we're intending on, the outcome and how it affects people's whole lives. So for me, I think having, you know, a good sense of humor, or trying to, you know, seek humor and not be jaded and bitter, understanding that life is a process of unending growth and learning through our experiences, and then just also being assertive. I think just being like, you know, this is how I feel, this is what I believe, these are what my values are, and I'm going to assert them, and I'm going to stand for them. So those are some of the ways that I've overcome the shadows.
Well, I don't know that I've overcome any shadows. I think it's always an overcoming process. But I think you can't overcome things by yourself. The way you can be in that process of overcoming is working with other people. And if you can't find them, then you have to look for those people who will be your support system, and keep looking for them. And if you're going through a hard time, likely there's somebody else in the world who's going through a similar hard time as you, and if you can find that person, you can support each other, and you know that you're not alone.
I think the best way for me is just to try to keep telling myself that I'm a good person. Keep telling myself I have the confidence to do whatever I want to do. I just have to keep reminding myself that I have enough self-confidence to finish whatever job I'm doing, and that I actually have the talent, the education, that I have everything I need to complete that job.
Well, now that I'm going to a new school, I've had a lot of help where my teachers have helped me to begin to show people my art and tell me to start projecting my voice more often, and I'm starting to become more comfortable with that. I feel like with their help I could overcome